Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Last week, we brought you the first part of the story of Carmela Knight, beloved mother, daughter, and friend. In September 2014, she was discovered dead in her garage, which had been set on fire.
There was gasoline on top of and underneath the deceased. Gasoline was distributed and ignited with an open flame.
Could have been a random guy that broke into the house. It could have been a bunch of other things.
I still can't wrap my head around anybody would want to cause her harm.
He might not have gotten his hands dirty, but he did it.
David Knight was switching up cell phones, had obtained a new passport, attempting to cross the border, purchasing gasoline at the Husky gas bar on the day of the fire and murder. Now he's classified as a suspect.
Hello? Hello? You still think they're tapping your phone or not?
At this point in the investigation, we were also considering doing an undercover operation.
Definitely a mistake that I cannot take back.
Here now is part 2 of Nothing Is What It Seems.
When Carmela's body was discovered in the garage of the Knight residence, investigators had requested alarm records from the home security company. They received them around the same time David became an official suspect in her murder.
Garage back door open.
Every time a door opens and closes, a window opens and closes because it has a contact on it, it registers. It's not just when you have the alarm set, it registers all the time.
They knew when David left with the kids and found surveillance footage showing Carm leaving work.
The most interesting thing about the alarm was, from the time David Knight left with the children, so there should be nobody in the house, to the time that Carmela came home, doors opened and closed, and there was movement in the house.
David had told police he took the boys to hockey practice.
Just come off the ice with my 2 boys. Right.
It checked out. But investigators didn't know what to make of the stories they were hearing from other hockey parents.
David was talking about suicide, alcohol, gambling, debts, infidelity. So many things that they told us that David was telling them about Carmela.
George Fotopoulos knew the couple well.
We met the Knights several years ago through hockey. Dave was awarded the select coach, and he approached me and asked me if I would like to be the assistant coach. As the years went on, our relationship with the Knights blossomed. You know, there was a group of about 4 or 5 of us. We all used to get together and hang out. Carmela was an excellent person, always there to listen. You know, she always had a smile on her face. Her overall demeanor, her calmness, her ability just to listen and to talk was amazing. Everybody knew that. Carm was always in Dave's shadow because Dave was always the one that was trying to be in the forefront. When you're starting to get to know people, there's always those initial questions, you know, what did you do? Where'd you go to school? He would always tell everybody that he was a mechanical engineer and he got his degree at York University. And one of the other parents in our group was an actual engineer. And back in the day, York did not have an engineering program. It did not exist. 70% of the things Dave said, you couldn't believe. The other 30% was a straight out lie. Dave would often try to tell us that he was associated with bikers. He had mob friends. And I used to say to the other guys, does this guy know who he's even talking to? Like, I think he forgets the fact that I was a police officer and have been a police officer at the time for 20 plus years, and he's trying to pass this bullshit off on us. The more we got to know Dave, the more his real true personality started to come out.
Particularly on a guy's trip to Florida.
I was in the hot tub with Kelly and one of the other fathers, Greg, and one of them mentions how there's another family in Pickering who were getting divorced at the time. I remember Greg saying, man, that's a shame because they looked like they were so happy, but I guess they weren't, right? Greg said, yeah, I think it's going to be a tough divorce because they're both digging their heels in and it's going to get ugly. And then out of the blue, Dave blots out. If I was in that position, I'd just kill the f***ing bitch. And I remember looking at him and saying, are you kidding me, buddy? That's the comment you throw out? But in typical Dave fashion, he said, nah, I'm just kidding you guys anyways. And I said, dude, that was not a kidding comment.
He'll never forget the last time he ran into Carm at the hockey arena as he made his way down to the dressing room.
And I went over and I said, hey, Carm, I gave her a big hug, a big kiss on the cheek. And he said, you know, how are things going? How was your summer? And she goes, oh, you haven't heard? Oh, I kicked Dave out. I found out he was cheating on me this whole time in Florida. She said, he has put my financial situation in such bad standings, I don't think I'll ever get out of it. He has a second mortgage, third mortgage on the house that I had no idea about. Line of credit that is totally maxed out. I said, Carm, I have to ask you, is he being physical with you? And she paused for a second. And she said, what I don't like, George, is the way he treats me in front of the children. He's just becoming more and more angry and violent. He has held me up against the wall and yelled and punched the wall beside me. He's basically calling me a whore, a no good piece of shit. I go, have you spoken to the police about it? And she says, no, I have not. I said, listen, Carm, these situations don't get better. They only get worse.
George had to get down to the boys on the ice, but suggested Carmela speak with his wife, also a police officer with experience in cases like hers.
So when Janice came up the stairs, I gave her a big hug and a kiss, and I said, listen, we're here for you. You know we're going to help you out as much as we can. I said, but listen to Janice. I said, she'll set you on the right path. And that was the last I spoke to her.
As far as Dylan Augusta remembers, it was a busy but happy childhood.
We were definitely a hockey family. We played a lot of hockey, a lot of lacrosse. It was a pretty hectic childhood with all that going on between me and my brother. My mom kind of always took me to my hockey, and my dad kind of always took my brother to his. It was just the way things were.
The way things were changed forever on September 15th, 2014.
Like any other kid, I woke up and got ready to go to school. I actually remember being late on that particular day. I knew after I had hockey practice, my father then told me that my brother was coming out. He was going to be helping the goalies on the ice alongside my dad.
Was that unusual?
Very. My dad actually had never came out on the ice with me or even really tried to help me with anything. He was always focused towards my brother. We were driving back on the highway, back to our house, and we got a phone call coming through the car, and normally he would just let the phone call come through the car speakers. He didn't care that we heard, but this time in particular, he put it through to his phone pretty darn quick. He turned to us and told us that there had been a fire at the house and that the house was burning down. That was really all that was said until we got to the police station. Me and my brother waited in the back of our dad's car, and I noticed my grandparents were walking over, and my Aunt Nancy was in tears, screaming and shouting. And I heard her say, "Where's Carm?" And then the grandparents took us home. They didn't tell us anything until I think 2 days later. My dad sat at the dining table, and me and my brother were on the couches, and our grandparents were sitting there beside us. My dad just, he broke out into tears and couldn't stop crying and couldn't talk. And my grandfather basically just got up and said, "If you can't tell them, I will. Your mother's dead." That's how I found out that my mother died.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. It's now almost 2 months after the death of Carmela Knight. While police suspect her husband David, they know his brother Matt has information and that their friend Graham McDonald is somehow connected. In an effort to solve the puzzle, they began electronic surveillance and launched an undercover operation. We now return to part 2 of Nothing is What It Seems.
In early November, police overhear a conversation between Graham and Matt.
It was the first call that we ever heard between Matt and Graham, and it was kind of an odd call. Hey, how's it going, buddy? And then they started speaking about being kind of left in the lurch.
Hello, how's it going? Yeah, not great. I've pretty much been dumped down here and have no means to do anything or anything like that, so I don't know why. I haven't had a conversation with my brother for more than 5 minutes in the last 3 months.
Matt was also upset with his wife, Heather. She was talking about breaking up and had talked to the police about him as well.
I don't think Matt would have, and I still don't know why Matt told me, because he knows the type of person I am. I'm not going to hide a murder for you. I'm not going to cover up a murder for you. Are you kidding?
She told the police in Durham that I knew everything and I'm the mastermind behind it, and I had Durham's finest fly all the way down here and hunt me down and ask me 1,000 questions and all that other stuff. That Tim McDermott guy, right? Yeah. You know what? He pulled a bunch of shit on me too, eh? He went to hot sets. I don't know what he said, but he's telling everybody I'm like a prime suspect in this case. I can't even go to Toronto. Like, I'm a blackballed from Toronto from everybody.
The day after the phone call between Graham and Matt, Matt now makes a phone call to Dave.
Hello?
Hello?
You still think they're tapping your phone or not?
And Matt's response was, I don't know and I don't care.
I'm not talking to you about anything else other than the situation that I have been put in.
And Matt then goes on to say how he's been dumped in Florida, how he has no money.
I have not down there at all.
Really? Because this is the longest conversation I've had with you in 2 months.
How he's fixing up all of these offices for God knows what, as he put it.
I am spending what little peanuts money I have on an office that I know is only to renovate so somebody else can take it over come February.
He had been served this civil suit because at this point now the house is in Matt's name.
You have dumped a lawsuit on me with a and you haven't done all about it.
He continues on to say that his parents won't speak to him.
Because of I don't know what you fed them.
And he then goes on to say, you better send me a good chunk of change within 48 hours.
Do whatever you want. I have you over a hay bale. Realize that.
Matt,
I know everything.
Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Be done with it.
In that conversation, Dave also says he's going ahead with S.A. Casey.
Really? Okay. So where are you coming up with $975,000?
I have that money put down there.
I did not believe that he had the $975,000 in Florida. In fact, I don't believe that he had a large amount of money at his disposal based on the banking records that we had obtained. And the only way that he could get that money is if he was able to get Carmela's life insurance policy.
2 policies, in fact, worth $850,000.
At this point in the investigation, we were also considering doing an undercover operation.
We had David, who was obviously very knowledgeable about police, how we investigated things. We knew he wasn't going to ever talk to us again, or didn't want to. We had Matt, who was in Florida, so he was out of the picture completely for us. And then we had Graham.
We chose him because of the fact of these phone calls and the fact that he was so rattled by this investigation, the fact that he had misled the investigation by providing this alibi of being in Toronto, when in fact there was nothing to suggest he was in Toronto, so he appeared to have some involvement.
Graham had told police he'd been visiting his grandmother in Toronto when Carmela was killed. They found no evidence supporting his claim, but knew he had a personality they could work with.
He was very street smart, he was very talkative, he was a good conversationalist.
He was living out in Eastern Ontario, he had a job, we knew he was employed.
He had got himself a hotel in a small town, and so he was living alone, and he was very resourceful in terms of his ability to get around. He took public transit, he liked to walk everywhere, he was very close to his grandmother. He just seemed like the average guy. We arranged for Graham to unknowingly meet an undercover officer, and the two of them became friends.
It developed into a relationship with Graham helping out in certain jobs, like just real easy things to do. Gets paid a little bit of money, but the friendship just grows over time.
As this relationship was taking root, detectives continued combing through thousands of hours of video surveillance.
Interesting, great work. That's amazing.
They'd already found footage of David purchasing 2 canisters of gas the day of the murder, but he made another stop.
From the banking records, we learned that David had purchased gas yet again on the day of the murder in the afternoon at the Petrocan. So we obtained this video surveillance, and as David Knight is coming up to the pump, there's a passenger in the car, and the passenger appeared to be Graham. We showed that photograph to the undercover officer, and he felt that it was in fact Graham, and also suggested that the shirt that he was wearing, he had seen that shirt before. So we now know that Graham is with Dave just prior to him leaving for hockey. Shortly after their meet, Graham told the undercover officer that he was involved in a murder investigation and that his best friend's brother's wife had died in a fire, and that the police had been around to talk to him about it.
We were getting little pieces of, like, yeah, there's a police investigation, my buddy's wife was murdered, stuff that we already knew. We were kind of at a dead end with Graham.
They needed a way to get him to open up.
The undercover starts speaking about this mentor that he has, and it's a older fellow, older than the undercover officer, and he called him Uncle Dan. Uncle Dan had helped him in the past.
If it wasn't for Uncle Dan, I would not be connected with you.
Sometimes Uncle Dan would ask for a favor, and Graham would tag along.
So, for instance, he helped him drive a young lady out of town to another location, and that gave the undercover officer an opportunity to talk about how Uncle Dan gets people out of jams and whatnot.
As a show of thanks, and knowing Graham liked to ice fish, Uncle Dan invited them on an outing. En route, Graham and his undercover pal were pulled over.
It was undercover officers that were portraying as police officers. The officer approached the car, and through the police radio, he ran the police check on the driver, the undercover, and Graham, the passenger. The return on the radio said that Graham McDonald was to contact Detective McDermott and that he was a subject in a homicide investigation. So the police officer came back with the phone number and said, Detective McDermott would like you to call him. And that definitely rattled Graham.
Like right now, I need to find out what they want. Obviously, well, they want to arrest somebody, that's what they want. But yeah, but what do they want with me? Like, what more information do they want?
He was asking the undercover his advice as to what he should do next.
It's just one of those things that we have to take care of. You have to make sure you call it. Well, that's the thing. I'm going to call the lawyer Monday morning. See what they look at.
And then shortly after that, Graham said,
So at this point, I don't know if having this conversation with Uncle Dan will help.
Welcome back. As Graham McDonald seems on the brink of confessing something, David Knight tries to leave the country. We now return to nothing is what it seems.
After police had found his passport during a search warrant early in the investigation, David Knight had applied for and received a new passport. He had tried to cross the U.S. border once by car, but had been denied entry.
Dave was trying to get out of the country pretty much the entire investigation. He did get out once.
Because we had wiretaps and he phoned home to his mother and father on a daily basis because they were looking after the children, we knew what he was up to while he was there. So he had expressed to his mother and his children how he had purchased a home, and for them to go onto the computer and look at this new home that he had purchased, just walking distance from the school that they're going to be enrolled in. So he's moving forward with getting down to Florida.
At the same time, the passport office had conducted an investigation and realized he had lied to get the new passport. When he returned, he was notified they wanted it back. Instead of surrendering it, police overhear him making other plans.
He decided, because he still had possession of his passport, he then started calling around to private jets in order to book himself a one-way flight to Florida. And then the boys would come at a later time with his parents.
We got, it seemed like 7 or 8 different requests from different brokers and also through our own website for the same trip.
There was urgency in the sense that he knew that he had to turn in his passport. He must have known he was flagged, so therefore he then secured a flight for that upcoming Saturday for him and his dog with a private jet.
For an international trip, you would also submit your passport, submit it to a thing called APIS, which if you're going to the US, you need to submit an APIS, passenger manifest. And that manifest then is checked in their system and says, okay, this person's approved or not approved.
He was on the phone with Bazam quite a bit. He was worried about it.
He just kept asking, like, hey, has customs approved the arrival? And I was like, well, why would it not, you know? But funny enough, I got a call from customs in Tampa, somebody alleging to be customs in Tampa, saying you've got a trip coming to Tampa, the person you're bringing is going to be non-admissible. And I thought, come on, like, this is a competitive business, but which one of my competitors is trying to do this?
But it wasn't a competitor. It was, in fact, customs. And in the end, David was cleared to fly, but he never made it to Florida.
The day of the flight, I drove to the airport. I thought, okay, I'm going to go meet this guy, see what he's all about. I walked into the hangar and there was, I saw the crew and there was a couple police officers there. And I thought, that's kind of weird. And then I heard it on the radio that he was 5 minutes out. And I was like, that's weird. So basically the way it works is you buzz the gate, you drive around. So he drove around, his dad drove him, and he had his dog. And he got out, we put the bag on the plane, I took the passport into the office, gave it to the police officer walked out. He said, I'm seizing your passport on behalf of the government of Canada. And we were all like, huh? What's going on? So David's there, he's like, why? And he said, you know why. Just like that, and he walked away.
I think it was that night he was on the phone with Bassam trying to organize other flights. You know, he was going to get his British passport and try to get out of Canada with a British passport. It was nonstop. He was very motivated to get to Florida.
A few weeks later, in the ice fishing hut, Graham confides in Rob.
Definitely a mistake that I cannot take back.
What was being discussed was the murder and Graham's involvement in the murder, which I was completely shocked to hear.
This wasn't something I just fell on my lap. It was something gone through for a bit, thought about for a bit. It was planned. Yeah.
David had promised to pay him for his involvement.
What were they supposed to put in place for you? That they fucking didn't. It was just supposed to, like, this whole Florida thing, set me off. There was supposed to be funds involved that I had never seen, and I found out information after the fact. The guy's broke. How much were they going to give you? 200 grand. 100 grand? Who came up with the fucking idea, like in terms of what to do? Well, he did for the most part. And he said, you do this for me? Yeah. Cover up with a fire? That was the last one, I think. Why did he want him dead? Well, apparently he was looking for some money.
It was more than they'd gotten in weeks, but not a specific admission of guilt. It was time for the ACE card.
The undercover then said, well, I don't know if Uncle Dan can help you or not, but he is also ice fishing, so I could maybe ask him to come over if you'd like. And Graham accepted that, and then Uncle Dan made his way to their ice hut.
So, Rob says you want to talk to me about something?
He said, first and foremost, you need to be honest with me. You need to tell me the truth.
Tell me your problem.
Okay, so, well, all of a sudden, there was a house fire in Pickering. When the firefighters got there, put the fire out, found a body in the garage. Yeah. Well, because I'm associated with all these people, yeah. Obviously my name came up. Now they're going around. They came, they asked me questions. What do I know?
Graham says police told him they found DNA on Carmela's body. He's worried because he was in the house 2 weeks before the fire doing renovations.
All of a sudden they're coming around saying, you know, we want to sample your DNA. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, my DNA is all through the house.
Okay, well, listen to me, Graham. There must be more to this story.
Okay.
I'm a pretty smart guy. I don't know what Rob told you about me. There's more to this story.
Absolutely.
Or you wouldn't be all upset about this.
It's a stressful situation. I don't.
Well, you know what? No shit is stressful. No. Okay? You want my help?
Yes.
If you want my help, I need to know what the happened. And not right now. We're not going to sit here and go through this whole thing right now, because I'm out here with my good buddy.
Yeah.
And the freezing cold. But we could talk another day, and you can tell me what happened. But you know what? Give me a little bit now so I know what I'm dealing with here.
The problem I'm running into now, the guys that I deal with, well, now they're starting to throw my name around. But
so are you telling me you've had nothing to do with this whatsoever?
I can't.
What do you mean you can't?
I can't say I've never had nothing to do with it.
So you've had something to do with this?
Yeah.
Okay, well, these are the things I need to know. Give me a little bit here. How much are you involved in this?
To a good extent.
A good extent?
Yeah.
But did you kill this broad? Because if you did, then that's the first step. We gotta fix that. Did you kill her? Are you nodding your head yes?
Yes.
Okay. What do you want from me? You just want this to go away?
Yeah.
At that point, Uncle Dan cut the meeting short. They needed a plan.
And so they arranged to have a meeting at a further time. Graham was to provide details about what happened because they had somebody else in their friend group that was willing to take the fall for this murder.
At their second meeting, Uncle Dan presented Graham with a possible way out.
The idea was that they had a person in their friend group who was about to pass away with an illness, and that he was willing to take the fall, but Graham had to ensure that his children were taken care of, so he asked him to do a trust fund for each of his children in the amount of $10,000. Graham had been exposed to this person, but from afar. The scenario consisted of the primary undercover officer going to visit him, just to check in with him and to say hello, so that Graham could watch the interaction between the two of them. And so that it looked real, that there was in fact this other person in their friend group.
It was convincing enough that Graham agreed to the plan.
From there, they asked him to provide all details because in the end a dying declaration would be put forward to the police, so all of the details needed to make sense and be factual. He spoke about some previous plans that they had made, that he had been in the house before.
The most I was expected to do was, when everybody's at work, I go in the house, plant everything, leave. I had the house keys, I had the code for the alarm.
Carmela reported to the police that she thought something was going on in her house in August. David was in Florida, so he wasn't home, but there was still movement in the house, and Carmela didn't know who it was. We believe it was Graham McDonald going into the house to try to plan out the homicide earlier.
It didn't work. I tried 2 or 3 times, and then eventually it's like, what do you want me to do? Like, I don't want people to notice me coming every day. It took so long trying to set it up that it just got to the point where he needed to get done.
He had been planning this for a while.
It started off, we were trying for like poisoning. She used to do a milkshake in the morning.
But she stopped taking the smoothie, so they had to come up with a different alternative plan.
Like he knew the way the plan was going to go?
By the end of it, yes.
Yeah.
We talked about it. He did some setups in the garage for me to make it look the way we did.
Okay.
You know,
so he helped set things, like that part.
Yeah.
It was decided that Graham would hide in the house and await for Carm to come home from work.
So how did you get there?
He picked me up. Well, I was with him for most of the day in Toronto.
Yeah.
I picked up a few things, dropped me off at home,
and I got in the back seat. He drove the car right to the garage.
He spoke about David already having the gasoline there. We knew at this point that Dave had purchased the gas at the Husky Gas Bar that morning at 11:10. We also had a witness up the street that told us that they saw Dave with his car backed up to the garage with the trunk open just shortly after 11. We also know at this point that Graham was in the passenger side of David's car for the second purchase of gas, just prior to going back to the house for them to leave for hockey.
I went and right to the basement. Kids got home about 20 after 3. Okay. They had their hockey gear together. They were there for about 20 minutes. And then he loaded them up in the car. He came in to tell me they were on their way out.
Graham waited, knowing Carm would be home around 5 o'clock.
He watched from the front window and he saw her pull up in her vehicle and heard the garage door open. So he then hid in the main floor bathroom. Uncle Dan had Graham sketch out the house and show him exactly where he was and just exactly how things unfolded. Graham then told Uncle Dan that as she came in through the garage, through the laundry room, he was hiding in the bathroom, and that he approached her from behind and she fought. She defended herself and she fought. And he eventually got her down onto the ground and he strangled her.
This all happened around 5:30, and then I waited till 8. We had burner phones, so I had to be able to have contact with the guy to arrange everything and stuff like that.
Contact with who?
The husband.
I was in the room giving out investigative actions. Burner phones, go find this.
Graham moved Carmela's body to the garage.
I tried to make it look as a suicide with drugs and that.
He planted cocaine inside of her purse that she had placed on the counter. He then staged the scene by putting a tourniquet around her arm, and using a syringe, he tried to inject her with cocaine.
The only problem with that was, I think, when I tried to inject it, the blood was already stopped flowing. It didn't process right.
He waited until dark. He then doused the garage in gasoline, and as the gas was starting to run out underneath the garage door and out onto the street, he decided to light the garage on fire. Once he got outside of the house, he went through the back field. He phoned Dave and told him that everything was done.
The same phone call Dave had been on at hockey practice.
We were able to determine through bank records that David had e-transferred money to Graham on September the 5th, and Graham immediately withdrew the money and purchased 2 phones. We were able to obtain the phone numbers of those 2 cell phones and show the connection to the burner phone being used by David Knight at the arena.
Graham also talked about how he was to be paid.
He also indicated that all money was to come through Matthew, to not draw attention to Dave withdrawing large amounts of money.
He pretty much just gave me $2 grand, told me to leave town type thing. Right?
$2 grand, that's it?
To Tommy Gore, yeah. So that was the only thing he can pull out without raising any flags. He had to get it off his parents or something like that.
That was the bank trip detectives had seen Dave make 2 days after the murder. He'd had his mother withdraw money for him.
So at that point, we needed to draw in David Knight somehow, because essentially these are Graham's words and he could be setting him up. And we needed to corroborate everything that he just said. It was set up that Graham should approach Dave and ask him for the money that he's owed. We were aware where Dave liked to hang out. We knew that he liked this particular pub in Toronto. So the undercovers drove Graham to meet up with him. He was surprised to see him and asked him if he was wearing a wire and if he was in with the cops, and Graham assured him that he wasn't. And they went out back to the dumpster and had a cigarette together, and then just had a discussion about the investigation and how they both had been talked to by the police. And David told Graham to come to the pub the following Thursday.
At that next meeting, Dave paid Graham $5,000 towards the murder At the same time, Graham told him about the dying man who was willing to confess to it, but said he needed a personal item of Carmela's.
He needed something of hers that would beef up this declaration, in a sense. So they had a further meet, and Dave then gave Graham a rosary and said that it belonged to her, belonged to Carm. So as a result of him paying him and passing off this rosary and their conversations during their meet, we felt that we had enough evidence against Dave to draw him into this conspiracy. They had a further meet planned where Graham was to receive more money. Dave was going to give him another payment. But at that point, we had already planned that we were going to arrest both of them. So on that particular day, they were both arrested, charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and arson.
I got a call from John, and he said, hey, can you and Nancy come to the courthouse? And I said to Nancy on the way down, I said, I think they arrested him. She goes, oh, Mom, she goes, that's just wishful thinking. We went up, we sat in this big room, and we sat down, and Diane said, we got him.
I believe he was on his way to pick me up from school. And it was towards the end of my school day. I got called down to the office, saw a couple of police officers in suits. The first thing they said that my father had been arrested, and I just broke out into tears again. When I went to see him, it was weird because we were with the grandparents. It's weird for me to say, but I was the only one who wasn't crying.
Why do you think that is?
It almost felt like that these past couple of months of horror that I'd spend with him and him being angry and taking it out on us, and that it was over.
For a couple of weeks after Carmela died, David had taken the boys to stay with a friend.
I do recall one time them looking under my father's car for a police tracker. Just crazy, bizarre stuff happening. I didn't know what to think.
Did it ever cross your mind that it could have been your father?
Not until a little while after it had happened. It was more or less the behavior and the anger that he was displaying towards me and my brother for just, we weren't doing anything. And I remember actually one time, in an attempt to let me and my brother take our anger out, he told us to smash 3 burner phones on a balcony that were in a plastic bag.
David and Graham were arrested on February 27, 2015. 5.5 months after Carmela died.
Once Graham and Dave were arrested for the murder, we needed to turn our minds to Matthew. We had the evidence to arrest him for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact to murder. However, he was in the US without any plan to return. We were able to listen in on a phone call where he spoke to his mother, where he talked about having firearms, and he talked about if the police or Durham's finest were to come back down there again, he would shoot them because they're trespassing and they'd be on his property. We also knew at that point that when he went to the US, he had a B2 visitors class passport. Upon the expiry of this B2 visitors class, they arrested him for the firearms because him being an illegal alien, he is not to be possessing firearms. Once his immigration overstay and the firearms charges were dealt with, then he was escorted back to Canada, where he was arrested at Pearson upon his arrival.
That was September 29, 2015. In April 2017, he pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and received a sentence of time served. Court proceedings for the other two took more than 4 years.
Graham ended up pleading no contest after the undercover operation went in. David was different. He took our entire investigation and everything he learned in court and used it when he testified. I was the detective sergeant at the time, so I was just in the courtroom. Diane was part of the prosecution team. I was out doing investigative actions on what David Knight said in his testimony, I had to go and investigate the things that he was saying in the courtroom because he came out with new stuff and we had to follow up on it. I couldn't even believe it.
David Knight and Graham McDonald were both convicted of first-degree murder and received sentences of life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 25 years.
Oh, when I heard the verdict, I just cried. I just hugged Nance and I just grabbed her arm and I just cried, you know. Because I never had a doubt, but it was just like, why? Why did you do this? For what?
Did you say anything to your father when you found out the verdict?
I just remember him crying on the phone, telling me it's not true, and I don't know, I was just at a loss for words. I didn't know what to say. And he was just saying he's gonna appeal it, it's not true, and I didn't know what to say. I just kind of said okay. Didn't tell him off, I didn't try and believe him, I just said okay. I have no faith in you, no trust in you, no love for you. I don't care. That was kind of where I was. I guess after that happened is when I really started to try and become closer with my mom's side of my family, and that helped me. Just helped me know that I was still always accepted here and that they still loved me.
Dylan says that support means everything to him because even as he heals, the memories are fading.
I talk about Karma all the time, so I never ever want anyone to forget her. Not my friends, not my kids, not my family. I don't have full-length conversations, but her name always comes up, always.
My mom always taught me to respect the people around you, act with kindness first. She cared for those who are around her very well. I appreciate it for that. The way I want to live my life is the way I'm going to live it, but I try to do it with respect. What her wishes maybe would have been, or what she would have said, or what she would have told me to do.
Together, they find little ways to keep Carmela close.
Her favorite color was purple, and for her birthday, we released balloons, and we also cook her favorite things. She loved pasta and peas, stuffed artichokes, and also she loved the flour from the zucchini. We make it into a patty, like a little pancake. You fry that up, and she loved that.
When people try and tell me ways to cope or do this, try this, talk to this person, it doesn't do anything for me. For me, like, it probably sounds bad, but hopping on my dirt bike does way more for me than talking to somebody ever will.
In those peaceful moments, Dylan says he finds perspective.
I have all the support in the world, I do feel like, but I mean, I will say there is truly no other support like your mother or your father, but unfortunately I don't have those. But I keep pushing. And on the back of my mind, she's rooting for me up in heaven, so. I'm gonna get a stopwatch over my heart, and then on the stopwatch it's gonna have the time 9:15, representing the day that she passed away. For me, it just kind of symbolizes that everybody's time here is limited and not to take any of it for granted. Tell the people you love, tell them now. Don't wait till tomorrow, don't wait for anything.
For the Augustas, healing is made more difficult by updates they receive after the fact, when Carmela's killers are moved around the prison system or allowed to attend outside appointments. For that reason, Franca is working with her friend Lisa Freeman on a federal bill to give victims' families advance notice of these events and greater say at parole board hearings. It's a small way of carrying on Carmela's legacy of looking out for others.
I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.